Mysteriously, I found a family on my Sims game. Maybe I thought my sister could decide to add this family as a joke. She's done it a few times before. I had a reason to believe that she actually did it when I actually looked at the family. It included 4 adults, 1 teen, and a young kid. The teen's name was Caitlin, had a part-time job as a receptionist at a spa, had a C average in school, probably must have been under a lot of stress. 3 out of the 4 adults were unemployed, and they were named Alvin, Panama, Robert, and Will. Alvin was the only one holding a job, and was a squad leader in the military career. The other 3 were content, just hanging out at home, although they did not seem to like each other at all. The final one was Albert. He was just a little kid who had a B- average in school. I thought this was weird as a family, but it seemed fine, until I looked at the photo album. It showed Alvin marrying a girl with black hair. Alvin was blonde, Albert had black hair. I assumed that this had to be Albert's mother. It was showed pretty much like their normal happy bits, like Albert being born. All of a sudden, and then cut to the fire. I thought that this was unusual, that it would be so detailed, but in the next picture it showed a toddler. Albert just sort of staying there, while Alvin right in front of the tombstone crying. It had to have been Albert's mother, who had died in the fire. Unfortunately, I have not found her in-game, but later on, I did find her tombstone. The next picture showed Alvin moving with Palma, Robert, Will, and Caitlin. Caitlin was Will and Palma's daughter. The picture was shown that of 2 adults fighting. Fires being started, no more deaths, but also some unusual pictures. Alvin was almost in none of these pictures, but the first one showed Robert cooking the food, giving it to the others. And then one by one, it showed them hurling in the toilet, obviously the bad food, which often makes Sims sick. The pictures after showed Robert attacking Will and Palma, then yelling at Caitlin and Albert. Other pictures in the album included everyone fighting with each other, doing some mean things, like breaking the computers, appearing to abuse Albert, and then it showed Albert sitting alone in his room. While Caitlin was out of the focus, probably at her part-time job, since she was the only other member bringing in any money, Alvin finally showed up in one of the pictures. He was shown yelling at Robert, Palma, and Will about something. I assumed it was probably telling them to get a job. The next picture was of Robert attacking Alvin, which Alvin won since he had a higher body score. Military branch requires it. However, Alvin seemed to be vanished for the next photographs, which showed more of the same. More fires, more sickening food, more abuse directed at each other, and also Albert and Caitlin. Albert was shown falling asleep numerous times, especially after the pictures showing him sleeping alone in the room, while Will and Palma then came in and fought with each other, and then he left. A few times it showed him sleeping on the floor in another room, in the kitchen, or even outside. A few pictures even showed Albert passing out in front of the school. One of the pictures showed Albert being led home by a police after he fell asleep in the park past curfew. Right after as Alvin walked in home, it showed Alvin scolding and yelling at Albert. Albert then ran up to his room and was down crying, only for Alvin to be in the next photograph, yelling at him. After that, Alvin then showed up in some of those pictures of some TV tropes visitors would call dysfunction junction. Albert and Caitlin were even never mean to each other. Thankfully, the album ended with Albert and Caitlin talking about something. That's when I basically took over their story. So during the days, Will and Palma and Robert would repeatedly fight over each other. Although Will and Paloma would always get together and woohoo with each other. Sometimes Robert would even woohoo with Paloma, resulting in them slapping in each other. Will would often go out and flirt with Sims, prompting Paloma to walk over and slap him if she was there. One time Alvin came home from work, and the first thing he did was woohoo with Paloma, while meanwhile Albert was doing some homework. He wasn't even aware of the game that would let you do this, but as soon as we went out and started crying, right now I pieced together what has probably happened. Alvin had married someone, had a baby, and named him Albert, but his wife died in the firehouse when they moved into a house with Will, Paloma, and Caitlin and Robert, and vividly, they corrupted him. Caitlin came home from her part-time job and started to comfort Albert. I checked Caitlin's age, and she was able to a second-hand young adulthood. Within the next day, she could probably find a house with Albert. I paused the game and saved it, and then assembled it to a small house for the two to live in, within their price range too, so then I went back and waited. It would take a little while. Normally, Caitlin's part-time job took place after school, so after a little while, Albert was home with Will and Paloma and Robert. Albert was normally so tired, so he would immediately go straight up to the bedroom, and Alvin would start to take a nap. Similarly, Paloma and Robert were also taking a nap, although Paloma was still a bit tired for some reason. I joked about when that she was drunk, and she was hungover like till 3:30 p.m. Only Will was up, so the game didn't automatically go fast speed, which happens when you cannot directly control a sim due to them being asleep. So when I went to look at what Will was doing, making sure he didn't go or wake anyone up. However, I noticed that Will was fighting at a fireplace, and there was a carpet pit right next to it. Anyone who plays The Sims would know what happens when you put a carpet around the fireplace. It lights it on fire, so I immediately hit buy it mode and moved it away. Because I was quick, the house did not catch fire, and the fire burned for a little while, after Alvin and Caitlin walked home. By now, Robert and Paloma were up, while Albert finished his nap. After Paloma broke Robert's computer for the umpteenth time, I had her extinguish the fire. Will seemed to be a bit unusual. He would mumble to himself he had the insane trait after all, and would sometimes sit around and do nothing. In between spats with everyone else, I had Caitlin cook dinner so she wouldn't make anyone sick, as Robert could never cook anything good besides autumn salad and forget about what Paloma and Will, although Will could make waffles. The next day came and passed, and when Caitlin came home from work, she had progressed into a young adult. Immediately I had to find her a place to live, and moved her and Albert the hell out. Good thing too, he couldn't complete his homework all the time since he would run out of energy quick, and his mood was terrible, so his grade average dropped to a D+, a warning sign. Caitlin immediately found a job in the culinary career, and Albert got his grades back up, no longer being tainted by the influence of his dad or Caitlin's parents. And Robert, after I played this for a little while and taught Albert some writing, he began to write novels. That was always nice, and always making luxurious amounts of money. So when I went to go check up on the other family, the game had already played itself when you weren't there, so I went to see how they were doing without Caitlin or Albert. When I loaded up the house with the 4 dysfunctional adults, I nearly shit myself of what I saw. There had been a lot of carpets and chairs played haphazardly around the fireplace. Robert and Paloma were asleep, like what happened to Will when it almost burned the house down, but Will himself was up. He had been walking away from the kitchen. Before I could have done anything, I got the message that there was a fire on the lot, preventing me from doing anything else. When I got the news that there was another fire in the lot, and this one came from the kitchen, the inferno spread even more and more, while Will was calmly walked around the house. Suddenly I got more and more messages that the fire started the lot. Almost the entire house was now on fire. Now this was much as the Sims would allowed. But Will soon walked into the empty room where Albert and Alvin slept and appeared to be talked midair. When he then went to Palma's room, shouted and left, then went to where Caitlin slept and looked around, saw nothing, and then left. This was rather funny, because Alvin was at work and Caitlin and Albert had long left. Interestingly, he had only noticed that Caitlin wasn't there. He went to Robert's room, screamed something in Simlish, then he went back into the hall, which was now burning. Then he started to freak out like any other sim would and caught on fire. Robert and Paloma woke up and then started to freak out as the fire spread into their rooms. They couldn't do anything as they were boxed in by the flames, and the Sims can't jump out of the windows to save their lives, if necessary, and eventually. They too lit on fire, and within an hour, burned to death. I had only just ended there was no fire alarms in there, so as the fire burned out, leaving almost the furniture gone. Alvin was the only one who left in the household, and I was nearly horrified. By the time he came, almost everything in the house was burned down. Then Alvin came home and screamed, something similish, and then ran around the burning house and kept screaming. He then ran off to the lot and I followed him cautiously as to where he went. He went straight to the house where Albert and Caitlin lived. I thought that maybe he could have just moved in. However, the first thing he did was Albert answered the door, was there. Then he started shouting at him again. That killed my any urge to move Alvin to the house with him. I then sent back him in the house, after cheating a bit to restore some of the furniture. I moved to where Caitlin and Albert were, and they were rather doing well. Caitlin was supporting Albert rather well, and Albert was becoming self-sufficient. However, Alvin then kept coming over and would scream at the two in Simlish every time. I'd send them home. I saved the game and left. I then got bored and decided to play another family. The things went normal, and soon I heard the noise and spotted the burglar walking in the house. Thankfully, the burglar alarm went off, but the burglar looked familiar. I looked over at him and the name Alvin popped up. What the hell? He was a military. Alvin was then arrested and taken away by the police. Interestingly, I was never able to find him again in the game. The house was then empty completely, but when I went to edit out and move another family in, I noticed that there was full other furniture and items I did not place in. What the on earth? So then I went to Albert and Caitlin, and they were doing rather well. Albert became a teenager and kept pushing in his writing, while Caitlin became an adult and they continued the events in their culinary career. Both of them were rather happy, although Caitlin was always much older, as she became an elder while Albert became a young adult. And Caitlin moved on, but at least was happy. After I moved the two out of that hellhole house, that was the only time Albert was sad, but by that point, he was self-sufficient with the ludicrous amounts of money that you can make from writing novels in the game. Her death wasn't doing anything falsely, so I decided basically to make Albert lead a good life. He was making money from his books, so I moved him into a bigger house. He seemed happy to leave it all behind. At least I had guessed. He kept going more and more, and really paying any effects from the royalty checks. He continued to have a happy life, going on vacations and everything. So the one time I started up the game, I found Albert at the cemetery. I noticed that he seemed to walk over a few gravestones, instead of mourning the death of any Sims, and angry sounding words in his Simish. I looked at the gravestones and found them labeled Paloma, Robert, and Will. He went over to another gravestone and cried. Right next to it, he said the angry things in Simlish again. I looked at both of them, and one of them cried was listed Jennifer, and the next one was Alvin. Jennifer had to be his mother, I assumed. I didn't know when Alvin died. The last thing I saw of him was that he was caught burglarizing the house. Then he found another tombstone of his own and cried, and this one was Caitlin. So Albert didn't have any kids or get married, but he made a lot of friends, and he was never really in a reclusive sim. He would regularly go out of town, dated a few times, but never really settled down or developed a romance. He threw parties a few times and went on to other vacations, having some fun in the nightlife too. And even though he befriended a vampire, I made sure he didn't become a vampire though. A few more times, Albert became an elder, and then he went back to writing more books than before. Mostly I had him write mysteries with some occasional trashy sci-fi novels. One time, for kicks, I had him write an autography called A Child Called It, after the Dave Plesser novel of the same name. I figured since then he was abused a lot during his childhood, he would have written something like that. I did that as a joke, but then got strange message that tugged on the people's heartstrings. Then people then came into the door and left him treats. Then he gained 50 friends from that. Something I have never gotten. I cursed that I couldn't make him get a political job, and that by now it was too late. You need friends for political jobs, and Albert made friends so easily. So then I noticed that only he had a few days left, so I made him as happy as he did. Had him talk to some of his friends. Eventually the day came when he died. Instead of trying to take the hourglass away from the Grim Reaper, he simply went on peacefully. But for some reason, he looked at the camera as he did this. His friends gathered around his new tombstone and mourned for him, then he left. The odd thing was that I had a compulsion to watch for a little while. After a day, nobody came down to mourn for him, but Albert's ghost appeared in front of the tombstone, looked at the computer and started talking, something in Simlish, then the message popped up. Thank you. Thank you for the second chance. You let me live the life I never got to have. I died in that fire your will started years ago. Now I'll go now. Thanks again. Then his ghost vanished, and the more I played The Sims Neighborhood, I never once got to see Albert's ghost or even Caitlin's. To this date, I haven't found anything on what the earth he was talking about. I have, however, found a similar house, a family in exchange, and when I asked them for Sim playing friends, they pretty much did the same normal things players do and screw things up. One of them emailed me and said that they found a weird house that they had lifted up in Naal, and apparently Will had burned down the house, and only Alvin and Caitlin survived because they were out of that house at that time. Alvin later on became a burglar, while Caitlin moved out and went into the culinary field. However, in Caitlin's case, she didn't take Albert with her when she moved out, since Albert had burned to death with Will who lit the house up. A few days later, I managed to do some digging around, wondering if this was an actual mod. I asked people to look around for some news archives to see if it was anything like this. There were very few Alvins around here, so I assumed that this wasn't around where I lived. However, I looked up the family on the exchange. Copper, by the way, was a genetic name. I found that Way had a British flag, so I asked some of my friends in the UK, I know via Skype, to ask if there was any case about 4 people dying in the fire, and someone who turned to crime later. It also helped me to was a librarian, so they could check on the old archives of the newspaper stories. However, I did fear that they were lost because they could have been making a transition to digital. One of them found an obelisk for some reason named Alvin, a former member of the British Army who had turned his life into crime once he lost his wife in a house fire, and his son a few years later. His death was ruled by him taking his own life. The obliterally only mentioned his wife's name was Jennifer, and that his son's name was Albert, and it did not detail anything about Will, Caitlin, Paloma, or Robert. I asked him to check for any fire stories within the few years of the event. Strangely, there was only one article detailing that how a house fire in the village was nearby. Liverpool had burned down, and all because of the death of it being ruled as arson. 4 people died in that fire, 3 adults and one child. That child I had realized had to have been Albert. There was no news about what happened to Caitlin, or any other news of how they found out who did it. There were evidently no boundaries posted about Will, Palma, or Robert. However, I do believe that we may have found everything we need, that my game was haunted, but it wasn't a malicious ghost. And that, my little pretties, was Sim Albert, a Sims boss game, something like that, creepypasta. My final thoughts on this story? Wow, I gotta be honest. I remember Miss Creepypasta narrated this story at one point. I think it was a few years ago when I wasn't really into creepypastas at the time, but I remember he narrated this one as well as Midnight Siren. And I mean, I do know a few people who also narrated this story. So I thought I would just go ahead and, sit there and, get started on reading this. So it's honestly a really well made story. Even though it's a pretty good Sims story, I honestly do find this to be, pretty amazing. Especially with this being the fact that, the protagonist is like playing a Sims game, only finding out that their game had somehow some weird stuff happened between the family of, Albert's family, and, how messed up, all the characters were in that. I mean, the his mom died in the fire was pretty sad. And I mean, I can honestly see that. I know any kid would be sad if they lost their mom in that tragedy. But the fact that, some the protagonist actually went through the game, it actually is somewhat believable. I mean, it could be possible that it could be a mod for Sims, but I don't really know much because I've never played The Sims before, so I can't really say much about that because I've never played The Sims. But I honestly really do think that this honestly has a really well made concept. I mean, if I have to say one thing that I wish that the story could be improved is maybe they can explain, if this was based on someone's life, or to be honest, if this was something that the certain mod or something decided to, mess around and play, put, all the things that happened in the game. But yet again, I mean, I don't know Sims because I've never played it before, so I can't really say much because I've never played the Sims game. But I definitely have to say it's anything's possible for it, to be honest, and I honestly really found this to be rather good. Okay. I guess with that being the case, that being said, it seems to be like a really good concept for what it is. So I definitely do like how well this game was made. I mean, it does have a fair share of a few cliches in there, but at least it's not super crazy over the top like how most creepypasta stories seem to do, but at least it's not, cliched. I mean, it's does have maybe one or two cliches, one of them being the ending saying it's a could be a haunted game. I mean, I know that's a cliche, but the ending wasn't really that satisfying. Like, I mean, it kind of did have show somewhat of what would be the case, but yet again, I mean, it doesn't really go into detail. But despite that, I honestly found this story to be, a pretty good concept. I really do like this story. So, for those who haven't seen this, I recommend maybe they take a look at this game. Well, not the game, but like the story. It's on the regular Creepypasta wiki, and I also do recommend checking out the other narrations of this story, especially for those who haven't seen it. But yeah, I can't seem to find out who the original author is, so if the author comes across this video and lets me know who they are, I'll be sure to let them know in the comment section that I'll be sure to give them proper credit in the description and all that. I'll be sure to give them proper credit if for whatever reason I do come across them in the future. Like, if they ever come across this video. I'm not saying they will, but you never know. But despite that, let's get on with what I do like. The grammar, I have to say, grammar was actually really good. But also, I do like how, the Sims game, went out as pretty messed up. I mean, there's no hyper-realistic gore in that, but the fact that this Alvin person, became, trying to do crimes after being, a military man, I mean, that's kind of messed up. But, I mean, despite that, I honestly do really appreciate how well this story is. So, with that being said, I'm going to sit here and say this is just simply my own personal opinion. And if you happen to disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these creepypastas. And this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story, I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. I'm giving it a 9 because while I can say the concept's actually good, it does have a few cliches. I believe one or two cliches I do know that are in this story, like one of them being the game was haunted. I mean, I could honestly say that's a bit cliched in my book, if I gotta be honest. But this one, honestly, it's possible it could be a mod for Sims, for The Sims. But yet again, I don't know the Sims game. I've never played it, so I can't really, say much about that. But if anyone who has their thoughts about it, feel free to state your own thoughts and opinions in the comments below, because I like to personally hear what you guys think. So with that being the case and that being said, what did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you all enjoy it? Did you all not? Also, what you have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to leave your own thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. And if you're brand new here to this channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload, so that way you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, please roll the outro because I'm out.